Hi everyone, thanks for your patience as we sorted out all our technical stuff in the background. I'm Lisa Brennan and I'm the Managing Director of a company called Strategic Ambitions. And part of Strategic Ambitions is the division of Graduate Ambitions. And we look very much to support students and graduates as they are transitioning from university to the workplace. And as part of that, we have implemented this series of Q&A sessions. And we've been hosting these since September last year. And so this is the last one of this academic year. And really the main aim is to introduce you as graduates to some really wonderful experts and people who understand what businesses are looking for from students and graduates, so that you can get some real advice, trusted advice that you can rely on as you go through your job search, your applications and any selection processes that you're attending. So I'm going to introduce you to Henry Webb, who's with me on the panel this evening. And then I will run through some of the housekeeping for this evening's event. So I'll hand you over to Henry.
Hi there, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. My name is Henry Webb, and I'm the co-founder and joint CEO of SMEConnect. We're a relatively new company. We founded ourselves last year, and we aim to connect students with internships, work experience, and ultimately grad jobs at some exciting small to medium-sized enterprises in Bristol, in London, and beyond. I'm currently at university in my final year, and so I think it would be unfair to say I'm an expert in this field. I sort of fell into this. However, I'm really enjoying my time in the recruitment world and think I'm going from strength to strength. So yeah, just be honest with any questions you have and I'll try and answer them as best as I can.
Fantastic, and very humble. Henry is very good at what he does and supporting a lot of businesses, students and graduates out there with the work that they do. So I'm sure he will be able to provide a lot of insights and support as we go through the call. Now, how do you get your questions to us is probably the main question that you need to have answered at the moment. So on the side, the right-hand side of your screen, you will see you have an option to submit a question. We would prefer that people actually talk us through their question, because it allows us to have a bit more context so that we can give you the best advice possible. And also that might make it more also relevant. So if you're in a position to ask the question yourself, just type your name in the question box. But if you, for any reason, are not able to ask, perhaps you don't have microphone capability, or you are in a place where there's other people and lots of background noise, then you can type read and your question into the question box and we will read that out and respond to you. We are having this session for the next kind of 55 minutes or so, and at the end of that then there will be the opportunity for you to undertake some networking with Henry and myself and some other members of the Graduate Ambitions team. So if you're able to, you can stick about for that at the end. But I think without further ado, we will open out for questions. So as I said, if you have any questions, then please put them in the text box. Any other kind of queries, technical issues, anything else, if you just want to let us know how you're finding the session, then those comments can go in the chat box. That means we aren't going to get mixed up or miss anyone's questions if we keep the questions in the question section. And so we have a question that has actually been posed to us by someone who we know is not able to attend, but they are they are wanting us to respond so that they can get so that when they receive the recording they can have some advice from us. And so this actually came from Canal Mayani, and Canal wanted to know how we can form a relationship with colleagues whilst working from home. And I think this is actually a really big question for new graduates as they're transitioning into the workplace, especially in this environment where COVID is still obviously very prominent. And whilst businesses are talking about going back to the office, it's likely that things will look very different in the workplace in terms of how we work. And so, yeah, I don't know, Henry, what are your thoughts? I mean, how have you been working over the last year and building those relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, I never used to really do Zoom calls or anything like that before. It was mostly face to face. So this has revolutionized that for us as a small business, being able to communicate over the internet, and it's brilliant. But I think it comes down to what really works for you. And there are many different avenues you can pursue. And I think going forward, it's going to be a case of doing whatever you feel comfortable with, and just being very accepting of other people's limits as well. This whole pandemic has affected everyone differently, and I'm a great believer in just doing what works for you. But I think we need to be very accepting of people's requests and requirements, and even though we might feel very up for going back to those face-to-face things, we need to understand that from an economic point of view, the workplace has changed, and we need to adapt and improvise accordingly. And the people who take to that new communication are going to ultimately succeed in the long run. There's always going to be a need for face-to-face interaction. However, the arguments in favour of this are really vast for businesses generally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, things are very, very different, and yet each individual, I think, has got their own personal experience of what their preferences are in terms of how they communicate with people, coupled with, how I suppose adaptable they are in terms of change. And these are actually really key skills that employers are looking for, that aspect of adaptability, flexibility, and how individuals manage themselves through change. So actually, this is a good opportunity for any graduate to display having, some good personal skills in those areas. I think it can be very easy for people who have worked for a long time, so people like myself, to underestimate actually how much people get out of the experiences of just bumping into people as you're making a coffee in the kitchen and building those relationships between different departments just as you're talking to people, or making your way through the office. And on top of that, you also have the situation where, as new people, generally you learn a lot from hearing other people's conversations around about the office, or hearing what people are saying on the phone, and kind of picking up a lot about the culture and how things are done in that office. Yeah. So it can feel like if you're not getting that experience, you're missing out. But you have to find other ways to recreate that. So a bit like what Henry said, you need to adapt. And things that we have seen very successful are, scheduling time to just talk to people and enjoy getting to know people, rather than only having meetings about work. So scheduling even 10 minutes with someone, it doesn't need to be a full 30 minutes or a full hour in your diary. 10 minutes just to see what did you get up to the weekend, or how are you getting on, is really good. Offering to have a coffee with someone virtually, or lunch with someone virtually.
The example I always give, which is about kindness in general, but also about those communications and bonds you build somewhere. When I first started school, in the first week, an older boy coming up to me and just saying, "How are you?" And then I think we take for granted a lot of the time And I think this pandemic has really brought it home to us, is that, you know, you're not living to work, you're working to live, and being able to have those interactions are really key to a successful career, and crucially enjoying your job. So yeah, I think we can't underestimate that, and I think things will get back to normal, but it'll be a different normal. And everyone's tired of hearing a different normal because we don't know what it's going to look like. But you just need to put yourself in a position where you are best placed to adapt to that, and then you can flourish accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think something else to always remember is that not every single company you work for, everyone's going to be based in the same office in the same location anyway. Even for companies in the UK, they might have 4 or 5 different offices in the UK. They might be part of a global organisation, so it might be different countries, different time zones that you need to consider. I mean, I've personally worked with people from teams all over the UK, and it's always been virtual. And I've worked with teams like from Russia to India to the US to Australia, and the difficulty with that is the time zone difference. But you can still very much forge those relationships if you make the time for it, and you can still very much learn from those people as well. So there are real key ways of building those relationships, and within your organisation when you join, they'll help you with that. You're not just going to be left to your own devices. You will get support, but if you're willing basically to look at everything as an opportunity to get to know people and the business, then that's all they can ask of you, really.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think we're going to go now. We have Thomas Prentice, so we are going to go to Thomas and ask him to talk us through what questions he's got for us this evening. And Thomas, Laura is going to reach out to you and give you access to come up and answer your question, ask your question.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, can you?
Can you hear me?
We can indeed, yeah.
Hi, Henry, thank you so much for your time. It was really interesting listening to you speaking about your experiences with your business. It sounds very exciting. I just had a question for you. Running a recruitment company, what are your plans for the future regarding your own future? Are you planning on sticking with that, or are you using the platform to recruit yourself? What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, well, it's a good question. Well, actually, I've recently taken a job at a shipping firm, actually in Cyprus. We're talking about working abroad and stuff. You know, that flexible work-life balance. I could very well be stationed somewhere else completely. So that's what we were getting at earlier. So yes, I've taken a job. However, I intend on.
Sorry to interrupt. Did you manage? Is that a link from your company?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no. Well, it was actually when I was talking to someone about SMEConnect, and they thought I was very passionate about it. So yeah, we got talking like that. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. But I hope to continue with SMEConnect alongside my current job and with my fellow co-founder, and try and take it to the next level.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No worries.
Congratulations. It sounds very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's your situation, Thomas, in terms of your own job search?
Well, I managed to acquire a job in the summer, but it's for a larger firm, and I looked up Henry's firm, and it's quite interesting having the links with smaller firms, especially during coronavirus, slightly different opportunities with slightly more interesting companies rather than the standard process of university graduates. But that was why I logged on, because of the sort of various industries that they offer. But yeah, so down the line, I'll definitely be coming back to it.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
I think it's a really good point that you've raised there, Thomas, as well, that a lot of graduates only look at big organisations that are recruiting into big graduate programmes, but actually some of the really interesting roles where you can get exposure to so many different projects come in these smaller organisations, because you almost get in there and you kind of get to create the role yourself, because a lot of it is based on what else you can do over and above what they've initially brought you in for. And so there is, I think, some wonderful opportunities out there with smaller organisations, and definitely not one to be missed.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Dom.
Do I exit now, or is that how it works?
It is indeed. That might take you right out. Oh, there you are.
There you go.
Okay. So I want to quickly ask you all a question, and then you can vote yes or no on here. I want to understand, I suppose, where you are with your job search. So if you are you graduating this year, or have you already graduated, or are you going to be continuing your studies? So basically, if you're graduating this year or have already graduated, if you click yes, and if you are still studying beyond this summer, then if you click no, that would be good. And we will see. Okay, so
Just going back to Tom's point, I think it's important to realise is that, like I was talking about my own job search, looking for something, to do alongside my recruitment business. I think it's about positioning yourself so that you can take the opportunities that are presented to you. For example, I got that position through talking to someone passionately about something that I was interested in, which is my business. And likewise, you might have it's not necessarily a business, but you might have a passion for football. You might coach football on weekends. And if you can talk authoritatively and passionately about something, then that doesn't go unnoticed. And it might not happen the first 10 times, but that 11th time, someone might go, actually, you know what, you've got the same passion and drive as I have for something. And they might give you that break. I mean, obviously, all formal channels you can go down and stuff, but a lot of things happen, happenstance and can happen organically like that. And I don't think you can't factor that into a job search. However, you can make yourself more attractive when that opportunity might come along.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Thomas is also in a very fortunate position. He'd already secured that position, albeit he's already thinking about what else could be a future opportunity. And I think that's a very good way to manage your career, not just be thinking about, that's great, I've got this job now, but it's what actually am I interested in? What is it that I'm passionate in? And, how can I work towards getting to that? And so having somebody who has an awareness of Henry, knows that he's speaking today and has taken the opportunity to come on board and speak to him is an excellent way of starting to build relationships.
Exactly.
And be able to start taking things forward for that next step.
And just on a personal note, I mean, we're talking about plans and planning for the future, contingency and stuff. I've got a plan for next month about where I want to be, or what I want to be doing, or what I want to have achieved. And that could be easily transposable to anyone. What could I do to make myself more employable in the next month? What could I stop putting things off. What could I do to do this? And I know where I want to be in 5 years' time, and and what I want to be doing. And a lot of people have lists. I've got all my post-it notes here about the goals and the targets and stuff, and I think they can be really useful. And everyone's got different aspirations and different goals to have. It doesn't matter how small they are, and I think it's important to have an awareness of those and really go for it. If that's taking Spanish lessons, or if that is getting that, after school job or something, these things all add up and they make you who you are.
Yeah, it really does. And I think it's the culmination of all of your experience together. It's not just the fact that you've studied or having industry relevant experience. There is so many other ways in which you can build that experience up. And we've got 88% of the people on the call who have either graduated or will be graduating this year, and 12% who will be going on to kind of either finish their degrees or further studies after the summer. So I think it's quite interesting. For me, certainly as someone who works with graduates, the number of people who, like you, Henry, have set up a kind of side hustle or a business as they've been studying, and then continue to do that as then they go into, the next step in their career. They still have that. But if you get any advice for anyone else out there who might be considering doing something similar?
Sure. Well, I just remember when I was growing up, I used to think, jobs are quite static, etc. But a lot of people I know who are where I want to be in the future did something similar or had an idea. So originally our idea was to help charities with, during the pandemic, find student volunteers, which we still do, sourcing, flexible work for students. We saw a disparity between students wanting to do volunteering work and charities wanting people to come in, but no one was linking them together. So from that, we started SMEConnect. And it's just exciting getting passionate about something and trying to take it to the next level. And, I'm under no illusions that, I might not be doing this in 2 years' time, but I've learned a lot of valuable things in the process that, have ultimately made me more employable, because I'm no expert in this at all. But I do know students, and I do know how I do know their hopes and desires and where they want to be, because I share in that as well, and I've lived through that. That's what I'm an expert in, I guess. But the whole brand and stuff, I just know that you're full of all these ideas and aspirations, and it's about putting those into practice. And there's a great disparity there for a personal service that connects the two.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that we're intending to showcase really over the summer. We recognise that there are so many students and graduates out there who have built their own businesses, who are doing that on the side of any kind of job that they are undertaking. And it's fantastic experience that they are gaining and building up a skill set that typically you wouldn't normally expect an early careers person to have. And so for us as a business, we are really keen to support these students, and invite them on to the podcast when we're doing that over the summer, to talk about their business and their skill set, to showcase that business, because there might be people within the network that then might want to use that business. But also to be able to showcase to employers, this is the skill set of a graduate today. It's very different to the graduates 10, 20 years ago, that setting up a business is very accessible now. It's very fast paced, and graduates are skilled in this. So we really want to make sure that we're showcasing this as much as we can to employers. So if anyone on the Q&A session tonight has a side hustle or a business that they want us to showcase as part of the series later on in the summer, then you can pop your name in the chat and we will come back to you with more details of that when the time comes. But
just on a side point, Lisa,
I also want to, sorry, yeah.
So just on a side point, when you were talking about employers and stuff, I was going through, one of my friends was applying for a job at a bank actually, and he got given this whole preparation sheet that has been handed down over generations of his friends or whatever, to try and all of these questions I was going through with him, and I was asking him for all these original answers or answers that he believed were accurate, and I was finding that, having had the experience that I've been doing for the last year with this, which is by no means a complete process, by the way. I'm constantly learning and constantly trying to figure out new ways to do things. But I was finding that it was way easier to not try and regurgitate an answer or to try and basically lie or fabricate an answer. But when they asked me, name a time when you had to change your plan and you had to get this briefing on time, I could think, yeah, actually I've had to do that. I've had to work through the night to get this after a client said, we need this happening now and you need to change your tack. So, it's that sort of hands-on experience that it might not work out the business even, but it doesn't matter. And the entry costs are so low now. You know, the government wants to encourage you to set up businesses. Whether they fail or not is neither here nor there, really. So yeah, I mean, why not just figure out a niche and try and have a go at it?
Yeah, and then having that experience of taking a risk, of trying something, of learning from it, of having the commercial awareness around about setting up a business, all very, very transferable skills that employers are really keen to have. So I think it's such a valuable experience, although I appreciate it's not for everyone. If that is your thing, then yeah, I think it's amazing. And yes, as I said, we'd like to hear more from you if that is the case. I want to just ask another poll out to the audience. In terms of your experiences of recruitment so far, the selection processes that you have been going through, the applications you've been submitting, regardless of the fact that you might still be looking for a job, you might not have been successful yet, has your experience been a positive one or negative? And on the whole, you know, so it would be good to hear your thoughts on that. So if you've had a positive experience on the whole, then click yes. If you feel that no, it's been a not so great experience for you in terms of applying for jobs and the processes you've been through, then click no. So I'll start now.
Just on that point, when I was a year or 2 years ago, when I was applying for internships for the summer, for the penultimate summer of university, I got a lot of feedback, and you know, some of it didn't make a lot of sense to me, saying that, you know, I was overconfident, and I got a bit confused with a lot of the feedback that I'd personally received, and sort of wondered, you know, what was wrong with me? Because, you know, I've always been told to be exuberant in certain scenarios anyway, and I've been encouraged to be, a leader, for example. But a lot of these things I was finding that when I got the feedback on the report, they were looking for that, but maybe not in the quantities that I was providing it. And it was interesting just going through a report like that. And I remember feeling quite dismayed at the time and thinking, oh God, well, my whole life been a lie to this point. So that's my little bit of experience on the front line.
Yeah, and it is really quite interesting, because a lot of this has to do with your passion, your interests, and how much you fit the company that you're applying for. So like you've just explained, obviously that the job role that you've got came from the conversation that you had, and you were able to be so passionate about that. And I imagine, knowing the conversations we've had up until now, Henry, and seeing how passionate you are, you would have been very exuberant during that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's, for this role, that's a huge plus, and that's what landed you the job. Whereas for some organisations, that might not be their style, to be that exuberant. So it's about finding that match. So when you get that feedback, that's not always necessarily about you, or you don't have to change. It's about finding, well, actually, if I can't be myself here, where can I go and be myself, and where can I get that experience? And it sounds like you've found that. Yeah,
and that's what we're talking about. It's not so much playing a game. You're not trying to game the system into getting a job. You know, some systems, we can say what we want about some recruitment processes, but they are designed for a reason, and we can talk about, how on either extreme they're not good enough or whatever, but they are designed for a reason. They are relatively good at sorting out, who would be. So you just need to be yourself in these situations and not try and play the game. That doesn't mean that you don't prepare adequately in advance of that role. But it definitely doesn't mean being fake, and it doesn't mean compromising who you are.
Yeah, it's so important that don't compromise on who you are. Don't try to fit a mold or tick a box for someone else, because you will hate it, and it will be so hard to go into that job and try to be someone you're not and not have the opinions you have, and not just be yourself. So
I wouldn't be able to either. I mean,
no,
you'd do that for a couple of months tops, and then you'd find out actually you'd be really unhappy, and then you'll just start doing what you're going to do anyway, and you'll find people looking at you weirdly, thinking, "I thought he was this quiet person in the corner, and he's not the leader I thought he was," and
Yeah, well, that's it. And then the other part of that is you probably end up looking for your next opportunity much sooner than you really wanted to, and you're back on the same aspect of looking onto the job market again. And so we have got a bit of a 50-50 situation here in terms of people's experiences. Like half of the people on the session this evening have said that they've had a good experience so far, and the half had said that no, it hasn't been a good experience. And I think we'd like to hear from both sides. I think we'd like to showcase, well, what was good about the experience that you had, if you've been having good experiences, because I think it's good for those who haven't had a good experience to hear there are companies out there doing it right, albeit that you might not have been successful. And for those of you who haven't had a good experience, let us know what it is that wasn't good about the experience, and let us see if we can offer any advice or support, point you in another direction, perhaps to some tools or resources that might help with the situation. So yeah, feel free to put that in the chat, even if you don't want to ask a question. But if you want to ask a question or come up or tell us about your specific situation, then make sure you put that in the question section. One of the things, Henry, that we spoke about when we were putting together this final session was it's very different compared to this time last year. We are moving into kind of, fingers crossed, post-COVID era, but we're also post-Brexit. And so we are in a situation where the visa process is changing for graduates, and that includes now people who were previously in Europe and able to come and study and work here very freely. And I'm wondering also, sorry, I feel like I'm interviewing you more than actually you being asked questions from other people, but how has that impacted on your situation if you are working abroad with this new company?
Well, listen, and I don't always talk in cliches, but here's one for you. Insecurity is just a fact of life, and everything we do entails, security and insecurity. And I think COVID and Brexit have brought that into sharp focus. And we can get quite hung up on points like the ability to travel. And I completely understand all of those points. And going back to who I am as a person, because that's how I approach things, is that, I've got a great support network around me. And I've got a lot of confidence, and that sort of thing doesn't really faze me. I know there's always a way to work things out. I'm a great believer in all things can be worked out with enough time spent. But I appreciate also that for some people, and for me as well in my life, I'm going to find that it isn't always about how much effort you put in, or sometimes barriers are erected in your way that are insurmountable. So you have to go around them, etc. But I'm still pretty young, so I haven't got lots of experience on that front, but I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to just seeing what's out there and just giving my all into it, and like I always have done.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to experience things. It's to just see what happens, because you can't plan for everything. I mean, obviously you can consider the approach you're going to take. You can think about, some of the practicalities around about, your next move. But to plan for every eventuality is very difficult. So being
exhausting as well. Imagine planning for everything. But as I said before, I mean, this whole thing, we always talk in stats now. What about the stats of going down the road in a car? We don't talk about these things, but they're in very sharp focus when people are being heavily impacted by the pandemic or by Brexit, and now both. it's always going to be in the spotlight, but that shouldn't deter people from taking risks, because ultimately that's what our capitalist society is based on. It is taking those risks.
Yeah. And what about everyone on the call? Are you looking to have a role that is local to you, or are you willing to relocate somewhere else in the UK or beyond? So if you're looking for a role that's more local to where you live, can you select yes? And if you are looking for a role actually that's outside of your area or outside of the UK, then you can tick no. So we'll put that on there. Oh, okay, so we have around about a third of people who are looking for roles that are, 2/3 of people, sorry, are looking for roles that are kind of local to them. And then another third who are looking to relocate perhaps to somewhere a bit further afield, whether that's in the UK or beyond. Well, that's just changed to 50-50. So I think it is quite interesting, and actually it's one of the key considerations that we suggest to all the students and graduates that we work with, is to think about what do you want your commute to look like, and if you are willing to relocate or not, because obviously it's more likely that the further afield your the location is that you're looking, or the wider that location is, then the more opportunities there'll be, the bigger your pool of jobs will be.
Of course. And nowadays, and I fully appreciate this myself, is that it's not always a case of not wanting to move away. It's a case of being able to afford to save up for that, first deposit on a flat, for example, whilst living with your parents. So what you want to do is all very well and good, but what you're actually able to do and is right for your position at that particular time are two completely different things. And I think that's definitely a new phenomenon over the last 20 years that's been coming towards where we are now, where you're facing a situation when people might never be homeowners, and you want to be a homeowner, obviously, to secure your future. So if that means a few years at home with mummy's cooking, then, so be it. But yeah, I guess it's just about goal prioritization and where do you want to be?
It definitely is. And I think it's very much setting out what is your ideal situation, in terms of what is it that you would like to, have in terms of, this is your perfect job. This is what you have been working towards. But then think, well, if you can't attain that, if it's not feasible for one reason or another, what are you willing to compromise on? Or as you've said, Henry, there might be other things that mean that although that's what you really desire, that's what you want, there are things that mean you either have to save money or you need to make some kind of compromise somewhere along the line that means that's not going to be what you are focusing on right now. But it's about understanding how long are you willing to have that compromise. Is it that you go, well, I'm at the start of my career, so I'm willing to sacrifice those first 2 or 3 years being here, being more local, saving up the money. But by the time I get to 3 years in my career, I want to be moving further afield, or I want to be owning my own home, and this is what I want my commute to look like. So there is different things that you have to take into consideration at any given point. What is it that you want, but what is it that you're willing to compromise on if what you want isn't available right there and then?
Yeah, and someone once told me, life's a series of trade-offs. You want to live in London or you want to live in a big city, but can you afford to do that? What are you going to compromise on in order to achieve that goal of yourself? And obviously the job is central to that. What is in your parameters? And yeah, it's a really interesting question and completely personal. My goal is going to be very different to someone else's goals who wants to have more of a social life and doesn't want to you know, obviously in an ideal way, I want to be putting away money to get that deposit on that flat one day, but at the same time, you know, you're only young once and you want to be somewhere with other people. You don't want to be stuck at home. So yeah, it's a really tough one and completely personal.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's why it's important not to compare yourself to peers, to think about, you know, even what siblings have done, you know, if they've been at university before you, and what their next steps were. You have to make sure that this is important for you, in terms of the decisions that you're making around about your career. And if you start comparing yourself to your peers or even other candidates that you don't even know, that's you wasting a lot of energy that you can't do. You can only ever compare yourself to yourself.
Yeah, and it's also important to know that you're not wrong in thinking that. It's a very natural human response to compare yourself to other people, and it can be a force for good in some circumstances. You know, it can be good for you to prioritize your goals and what you want to do, but it's about being realistic as well and saying it's horses for courses. You might have a friend who's got a £60,000 starting salary, you know, and but he might be, the reason he's getting paid that or she's getting paid that is because they are the best for that particular role, and it happens to be a high grossing role. But it doesn't mean if you take something different, are you any less like that. And I think you'll find that in all the twists and turns of life, we're going to get to a situation where all these things are going to be overlapping, and when you factor in a massive dose of luck, you know, things can really lift off.
Yeah, and I think there is that whole aspect of those jobs do exist, like you've said, like, you know, people do get them, but it's about what actually is your driver for getting the job in the first place. And someone in that position, you'll probably find they are working a lot of long hours. They are, you know, it's very intense work. Probably it's where they have to deliver results. They are in a position where what they're doing could have impact on the business if it's not done properly, even that early career stage. And so you have to think about whether that's the type of environment that you want to be working in, where it is pressurized, where you are working long hours, and is that the compromise you want to make because you like that, or because you know the money is your driver at this moment in time, and over time then you perhaps might move away from something that's that pressurized. Or if money's not your driver, then you might think, well, I don't want that level of pressure, so I can go for something that's probably a bit more of a kind of typical entry level salary or role. So I think it's really important to understand what those drivers are as you start to apply for jobs.
And when I'm doing when we do our recruitment process, we give, so after we sift them all through and stuff, and we look at their CV, then we give the people we want to progress to the next stage, we give them a week to have a really, you know, long, hard think about it, because you know, it is a big move and it has the potential, and people do get stuck in positions. I mean, there's a lot of chopping and changing in the recruitment world, as I'm sure Lisa has a lot of experience from, but also sometimes, you know, people do enter the workplace and they're not trapped or anything, but that could be something you just think, oh, well, I've done it for a couple of years, I'm going to carry on doing this. I was talking to someone the other day who'd been doing the role that they didn't enjoy for 6 years because they thought that's all they were good at. And you know, it's just sad to hear stories like that. But so it's a really big move, and it's something that you need to consider, you know, and but also that's not the only way to do things, and you can always retrain and restart. You know, we're going to be my generation, we might have 5 or 6 jobs in our lifetime, and that's the reality we've got to get our heads around.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare now that somebody does the same job for their whole career. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's certainly getting rarer and rarer. Now, I'm very conscious that Henry and I are just kind of going back and forward and kind of talking through different situations that we're familiar with. But there is still time for you to even type in the chat. We've got people in the call from different backgrounds and different fields of study. So if you've got particular situations you want us to to even talk through or come on and share, then please do. I have to say this is the quietest group, the quietest group that we've had, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know some people are just happy to listen to the chat that's going on, and that's all fine.
But nice to hear from you. Yeah, definitely.
If you get fed up of listening to us just talking about things, then yeah, please feel free to interrupt us by giving us a topic to focus on, or telling us a bit more about your own situation and allowing us to help you with that. So as we were talking, there, Henry, about that comparison between peers and that being really natural. It made me also think about some of the assumptions that people make when it comes to the lack of feedback around about early career positions, and probably not so much from your company, because obviously you'll be working directly with companies to make sure people get that feedback.
Yeah.
But what's your advice for people, when they are applying and it's high volume and you either don't get feedback at all or it's very generic? How do you think people can move on from that?
I think there is a shift happening in feedback. I think employers are going to come under increasing pressure to provide good feedback, not this sort of transactional thing. I think that's just a general societal shift, and in the industry, I think that's going to be a big thing. However, I think what I used to do when I was doing those internship applications is I used to email. If I got feedback or not, I would always ask for further feedback, and it just takes one email. If you haven't got feedback, they usually reply with something generic or whatever, and you might get fobbed off. But so what? Sometimes I got some actually quite good feedback, or they might send you your preparation interview, for example, which I know you can do online anyway. But it was nice to see me doing what I was doing and going, actually, oh God, Henry, you were being quite shifty in the interview. I was touching my face too much, and it was a bit cringy and embarrassing. But I learned from that. So I think it's about just being honest with yourself and actually just asking the right questions and not being afraid to email and kick up a bit of a fuss if you don't get the right feedback. You might be surprised at what you get in return.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a shift. I actually, I know a lot of people who work in graduate recruitment just through the type of work and through my career, that I've got a lot of contacts in that area. And I know that their desire is certainly not to not offer feedback or not offer constructive feedback. Where you have companies where they've got tens of thousands of applications, it does get very difficult, but there should be pressure on them to be resourcing that in a way that people can get, really constructive feedback that can be, helping them as they progress with their search, if they've not been successful. And I think for me, as a coach, because I'm also a trained coach, and one of the things you're trained as a coach is how, like, not making assumptions, and it's really, really hard, because it is the most natural thing to do, that when there's an absence of information, you try to fill that void, you fill that gap with what you think is the most likely scenario. But in these situations, those scenarios that you're making up tend to be negative, that you candidates, or that you did something wrong, or you personally are not right for the job. Whatever it is you're telling yourself, you don't actually have any factual information to tell you that if you don't have feedback. And so actually you're wasting energy and you're impacting your own motivation and confidence actually around about your kind of performance in these situations. So I would suggest actually that one of the things that you do, just as a bit of a tip, when you come out of a process, whatever level that might be, whether it's a psychometric test, a video interview, or an assessment centre at the other end of the scale, just write some notes down yourself, have a bit of time to reflect, even 5 minutes, on where you think that went well, where you think maybe that wasn't so good, and I can automatically make sure I prepare better the next time, or do something differently the next time. Because actually that's your truth of what happened there, and if you do it as soon after the situation as possible, then it's as fresh in your mind, and you're not thinking back and putting a negative slant on your performance. You've got what's actually happened.
Yeah, and just on a small business note, I'm not going to pretend like all small business people are going to be interviewing, think they owe you something, because they might not think they do. However, you'd be surprised, and in all these sort of mechanical tests and stuff, you'd be surprised about the human touch, and about how actually it's not all about process and stuff. And if you really want feedback, people are happy to give you constructive feedback, and they might not be trained like Lisa is in delivering it appropriately, but they really will never be afraid, and especially relevant with the smaller businesses. And just say, listen, I'm constantly learning, and they will hopefully strike a note with them when they were doing a similar thing themselves. And you can ask for that frank, honest discussion, and they're more than happy to do it. But you've got to ask for it, otherwise they're not. And most of the time, they're not going to offer it to you. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah, I think that is good to pursue it, to ask for it, and I also think that automatically it is to go to the person that's been contacting you about the interviews. So like it's normally the HR person that's been that point of contact, but don't be afraid if you're not getting a response from them, or if they don't offer anything. Don't be afraid to even reach out through LinkedIn to somebody that was on the interview panel, perhaps. Like if you get to that stage where you're actually meeting people from within the organisation, don't be afraid to reach out and say, listen, I know I've not been successful, and that's fine, but can you just give me a quick pointer on where I might be able to improve? And they might not respond, but the chances are they probably will, because as Henry says, people want to give feedback. They want to be able to help you be successful.
And just on a sort of semi-related note, a lot of people ask what my dad, when I was, my mum said to me when I was looking for a job a while ago, they said, why don't you send out letters to CEOs or to the head of HR and all these different things? And I looked at him and I said, who does that in this day and age? And my dad said to me, well, that's how I got my first job. After I finished university, I sent out these messages, and I got one reply out of 30 letters. And I said, no. Anyway, the next week I'm chatting to a friend of mine, and he did what his dad, he sat down and he wrote out the same letter. And this isn't for everyone. And the amount of responses, he got 4 responses back from about 40 letters that he wrote. And each tailored individually. It took him an age, but he got that interview with a very, very reputable company through that. He got the interview. They can't, they're not going to elevate you to the CEO or something, but he got in the door, and he now started working there this year. So it just shows you that there are more ways to skin a cat than simply going through these channels, which are very important. And it's not for everyone, and it won't always work. And it might irk some people, but if you put in the time and you make it personal, it can open doors for you, and it can only open them. It's not going to go the whole way. You'll have to sell yourself when you're in there, but it does happen. So that's probably, and you do me out of business as well if you were doing that, because you go straight to them directly. But that's what I would have done if I'd had my time again. I was looking.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because actually, the way that your reaction is probably quite reaction that your dad gave, but your friend going and actually undertaking that route was something that wasn't typical. So it probably made him stand out, actually, and probably made him stand out to a generation that were like, oh yeah, this is how I actually got to where I am today. So I think there is something to be said for making those connections, and as Henry said, that route's not for everyone, but being able to build those connections, whether it's through LinkedIn or Twitter, or depending on your organisation that you're interested in, an industry sector, it could actually also be something like Instagram or even TikTok, depending on the type of
Yeah,
role
and
you're
it's
applying for.
yeah, and it's not this sort of old boys or old girls club. Like there is a happy medium between employing friendly, sort of old fashioned methods of trying to get to know someone. Going on LinkedIn? Can I give you a call next week? It'd be great to speak to you. You know, these people are human as well, and that's what we're trying to get involved in the business with. Is this human connection and feeling like you're more than that. And these people are usually quite flattered. My girlfriend applied for, went on LinkedIn, found the CFO of, also chief of marketing at ASOS, and messaged him saying, "Oh, you're one of my best inspirations ever." And he said, "Yeah, of course I'll have a chat with you. She got an internship."
Yeah.
You know, and that could be, and again, it isn't for everyone, but you know, there's a lot of these opportunities are informal. A lot of the small businesses, for example, they haven't got a way you can apply formally for things. They might have a project happening at some particular time and think, actually, you'd be great for that. Come in and pitch it to me or whatever. So it's not always A, B, C. And you could do the psychometric tests, etc., which some jobs are, but a hell of a lot of businesses do it through personal connections and through people who impress them by getting out in front of them. And that only involves you being proactive in that.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think for some students and graduates, actually, that's very daunting to go out there and have to think, how do I approach people? But you don't automatically have to do that cold. You can, you could be tagging people in posts so that they start to get to know who you are, or you could figure out who in their network you know and ask for an introduction, because anyone on LinkedIn, if you search for them and you go on and look at their profile, you can see their connections. So you can also see if you've got any first, second, or third connections with them that you have in common. But you can just see all of their connections, so you can actually go on and really spend some time to think about, right, who might be the best person to give me an introduction. So you can do that bit of research, and if you are doing something where someone knows that person and is making that introduction, they're actually more likely to respond, because they're like, all right, someone's kind of said this person's okay, or they know them. It's not just somebody reaching out cold to me. So don't. I think it is definitely the way to go to be able to build those connections and relationships with people ahead of starting a job, ahead of applications, to really take a chance.
Yeah. And the way I see it is it's sorry, I told you later, it's part of a mix of things. So you're doing it through formal routes, you're doing it through informal routes, and things will yield at different rates. But you know, going back, and it is obviously daunting. And when I first started cold emailing companies on LinkedIn, asking to have a chat, I didn't particularly want to do that, and I don't particularly like doing it now. However, you know, it's risk and reward. If you want to be, you know, getting in or getting into the front of a queue for something, potentially your dream job, and securing the goals we were talking about earlier that you want, then you have, you know, there has to be some sort of compromise in there. And like I said, I don't particularly enjoy a lot of aspects of some of the things, the more difficult things, you know, talking about money or talking about when something hasn't gone quite right and having to be self-critical. However, I justify it to myself because I know that it's helping me succeed in what I want to do. And this is just happening at a business-to-business level. This is happening in your personal life as well, and at all different levels of the recruitment business, and at completely different stages. So,
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think it's just so important to build those connections, and actually, as I said already, to kind of take that chance on yourself and really put yourself out there. And the more often you do it, you'll stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, and it won't feel so strange doing it the next time. Or, you know, you might reach out to 10 or 12 people, but only hear back from 1 or 2. And that's okay. You know, you've still heard back from 1 or 2, but if you hadn't reached out to anyone, you wouldn't have had those 1 or 2 people. So.
And I tell you what, you writing to 10 or 15 people or emailing or whatever, I think writing's more sort of, it gives off you've actually taken the time to court someone in an old-fashioned way, and you would have done more than 10,000 applicants did to get somewhere. And, you know, we can talk about meritocracy and stuff, but being in business and knowing how these things are formed, it's not always through the official channels. And you can be a beneficiary of that. However, you've got to put yourself out there. And again, it's at different levels, and you build yourself up. If that's not your thing, first and foremost, going straight to writing a letter, then maybe, you know, just doing some LinkedIning and just making those connections and then psyching yourself up and taking the next stage. But, you know, you'd have done more than thousands of people, and you're potentially going to share in, you know, getting your foot in the door, which everyone talked about the whole time. Getting your foot in the door, what does that mean? It means establishing a connection, and that could be you.
Definitely. And actually, it was one of the top 3 recruitment methods that companies, when they were surveyed by the Institute of Student Employers at the middle of last year, they had stated that being contacted by people via social media was one of the top 3 methods of recruitment. And that had changed quite considerably. Even within 2 years prior, it wasn't a method of recruitment that they really kind of focused on. So it is becoming more and more important. I'm conscious of time, but I wanted to leave you with one example of what we've just been talking about, and it's a story I actually read about on LinkedIn about a student who had he was applying for a job with a company, and it was, the reason he was applying was because he actually really admired the CEO and the journey and how they had established the business that he wanted to work in. And so he thought, right, when I'm doing my research, I will look up this guy's profile on Wikipedia. And when he got to Wikipedia, he didn't have a profile, and he was a bit like, I can't understand, this guy is actually quite well known, you know, his brand is well known, his products are well known, and so he couldn't understand. So what he did was he wrote a Wikipedia entry, and he then messaged him through LinkedIn to say, listen, I hope you don't mind, but I have prepared this Wikipedia, you know, kind of profile for you, but I would like you to approve it before I put it online. And he was offered a job within 2 hours. And the CEO was like, he spotted a gap that was there, and he took the action, and he then was like, well, I've done the work, just approve it, and it can go live. And it might not seem like the biggest deal in the world, because not everybody hangs off what's on Wikipedia, but it was actually his thought process and the action that he took that the CEO admired, and he was like, yeah, but we'll have you on board. So that individual got to work with the person that he admired so much in their company, just from actually taking the time to do the research and spotting some gaps. So yes.
Yeah, and that comes about knowing your brief and knowing, and so he saw that and he took opportunity. But crucially, when you do get to that interview stage, we're talking about preparation, etc. And I'm not going to bore you because you will know what's expected. But just, you know, it's the easiest thing in the world when someone hasn't done any real preparation for something, and it's almost, and people get routinely irritated. People who are interviewing, because you're honestly wasting my time, and it's not, and they don't, and crucially, they don't owe you anything. And I think there's a tendency sometimes in today's society to go around thinking they owe me a chance here, they owe me that. No one owes anything. A lot of it's conducted on goodwill, the goodwill of that guy to give that other person a job for doing that. He didn't have to do it. Nobody would have batted an eyelid if he didn't do it. Likewise, no one's going to bat an eyelid if you don't reply to my letter. So, you know, there's a lot of goodwill, and you need to be catching that.
Yeah, it is indeed. So I am conscious of time, and I realise that we've come to the end of this session, and I know we didn't have many direct questions as such, but I hope that the kind of subject matter that Henry and I have been chatting through over the call has been helpful to you and given you some insights and advice. I really want to say thank you so much to Henry for being part of the panel this evening. It's been great to have this conversation with you and get to know you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
But also thanks to all of you who have joined the call this evening and have been listening in. As I said, I hope that's been really worthwhile. Thanks also to Laura in the background for keeping everyone organised in terms of all the tech side of things and organising all the information in the chat for us. We do have the opportunity, as I mentioned at the start, for some networking following this session. So what will happen is when I end the session, you'll automatically go back into the lounge area that you were in when you joined the call. And so if you want to stay for some networking, then just click a seat at one of the tables and we will come and join you. And if you are not able to stay for any reason, that's also fine. This is real life, so we know that other people might have other commitments. Then you can just exit by using the exit button on the right-hand side of your screen. It will also ask you to rate the call. That's not from us, that's from AirMeet. So yeah, and then it will allow you to exit if that's what you want to do. But thank you all very much again. I will end the session now and